Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the May edition of the Eloqua User Group. So today is all about the driving of personalization across various members of your team. So this could be the sales team, it could be the service team, or it could be senior executives within the organization, and looking at how we can use Eloqua sales tools to help do that as well. So let's get started and get the show on the road. So as many of you know, we use Zoom to record our webinars, and the replays are available on our blog, and you'll be getting an email in relation to that. And we also encourage Q&A throughout the session, so please make sure you use the Q&A. We've got some folks on the line to help facilitate that. And just be aware that anything you put in Q&A is visible to all webinar attendees. If you do have something private you'd rather ask, that's fine, go ahead. Please use the Zoom chat to do that and direct that to one of the hosts. So my name is Derek Bell. I'm the Director of Customer Success and Marketing at Marketing Cube. And I've got Jason O'Donnell, one of our account directors, on the line as well. And Jason's helping with the Q&A. So please make sure he works hard. That would be great. All right, so what's on the agenda today? So welcome and attribution. We'll look at personalization of CX with comms from broader members of the team. So that's what we're looking at, is having an email arrive in somebody's inbox actually from another person, not just simply the brand, so to speak. We'll also look at Eloqua sales tools, Profiler and Engage. And you may have seen these or may have heard of these. And so we'll give you a little bit more information about those. And then also just a couple of tips in relation to the implementation of those sales tools and how they work. We also have some information about Release 22B. And for most of our Australia, New Zealand clients and some into Asia, if you're on Pod 7, you're already on Release 22B. So that happened, I think, last weekend. So the rest of us will have that happen later this month. And of course, Q&A, but Q&A happens throughout. So again, please feel free to ask questions as we move throughout the session. Okay. So the personalization of CX with comms from broader members of your team. So what do we mean by this? By this, we're looking to make sure that marketing can provide other members of the team outside of the marketing team with the ability to send communications from individuals versus from the brand. And that image you can sort of see frosted there in the background of the slide right now shows you what you see as the Eloqua user, which is the signature placeholder. And you see these all the time from Marketing Cube. We tend to use the signature fairly heavily. Most of the communications that you'll get from us typically will come from myself in the context of the user group, or perhaps more broadly from Jason or Adrian or Marika, depending on sort of who your relationship is within the business. And so we're a small team, but that personalization is still a very simple process. But even for larger teams, regardless, you might have a sales team of 85 people communicating to an audience of 50,000. Absolutely the same principle applies. There's no difference. So the key thing that we're trying to achieve here is to determine who the email is from. And so at the moment, the default for most of you will be the brand. So in some cases, you will get an email from us and it appears in your inbox as being from Marketing Cube. We can amend that slightly. We might say Marketing Cube Eloqua User Group, or maybe we'll say Eloqua User Group, but the email which it comes from is the same. So with signature rules and signature layouts, we have the ability to control who that email comes from. And generally, the best example is looking at the sales team and perhaps who owns the relationship necessarily. But what it enables you to do from a marketing point of view is to have those senders identified dynamically based on the recipient. Okay, so at some point, somewhere in the data, we need to have a contact, which could be Jamie Smith, and Jamie Smith has an account director by the name of Jenny James, and Jenny happens to be the owner of that relationship. So, well, that's essentially what we need in order to do the personalization. So how does that all happen in Eloqua? Sure, we'll have a look at that in just a few moments. That's what we're here for today. So the key thing is that there are rules that will link a specific sender to a contact based on values in the contact record, or in fact from a custom object. But generally speaking, it would be from the contact record. If you're doing something a little bit bespoke or a bit unusual, then perhaps it would be a custom object that you might use, but we can create multiple rules that don't have to have just one rule. So let's have a look at some of the pieces that make up email signatures. So within Eloqua, you might be familiar with, you've probably been in the component library, and in the component library, you've probably seen signature rules. So it's the rule that helps you determine who the email comes from. And then you'll notice another area of the component library called signature layout. So the signature layout is purely the cosmetics. It's really just what it looks like. It's where you put in your logo. Think of it as the electronic business card. Take all the details from a business card, and they're typically the things that you want to put in an email signature. And there's every chance that your firm or your organization already has these in use today through Outlook or whatever your internal email package is. Then we need to move to the email assets. So now we're actually in the email design editor. And from the email design editor, you'll notice on the left-hand side, there's a whole range of components that you've got. And one of those is the signature layouts. This is where we take the signature layout that we've created earlier and we drop it in. So at this point, all we're doing is telling Eloqua which, from a cosmetic point of view, which layout we want to use, okay? So for an organization that has multiple brands, it would well be that you probably have multiple signature layouts because you'd have a signature layout to match each particular brand, okay? Now, how does all this information get into Eloqua? That's a really good question. So all of these things that we're using to create the signature and drop in the relevant details, first name, last name, email address, office address, mobile phone number, office number, perhaps also the URL to the website, and maybe even their LinkedIn URL, those sorts of things. All of that data actually sits under the user area of Eloqua. So just as you have a user account in Eloqua, we also need to create a user account for your sales team or the service team or whomever it is that we're wanting to send emails from. And so they're uploaded into exactly the same place in the user library or the user area within Eloqua. But from Eloqua's point of view, these are not licensed consuming users, okay? The technical term, as far as Eloqua is concerned, is disabled, which is not the best term in the world, but that's the term. So you're either an enabled user or you're a disabled user. And so the key thing here is there's no cost. You're not consuming a license to do this. So then we need to create our segment and we start to move to the campaign canvas. And this is where it all comes together, actually either a simple campaign if you want, or the multi-step campaign. And so this is where we now assign the type of rule that we want to deliver the particular email. And so our thousands of people will then get an email from one of 25 different salespeople. Okay, so some suggested steps or ideas for you to think about when you decide that you want to implement signatures. Okay, first one, determine who in the organization needs to be added as a disabled or non-licensed consuming user. Now, because there's no cost involved in this process, you can go ahead and upload the entire sales team. You don't need to add them manually one by one. You can download a template from the user library. Your Eloqua administrator can help you with this. You simply download the template, and then perhaps with the help of HR or payroll or somebody like that, you then need to fill in all of the details. Now, let's just be clear. One thing that I have seen happen occasionally is that, you'll have a team of, 35 salespeople, and there's one precious individual who doesn't want their mobile phone number shared publicly. All right. Well, it's either all or nothing, okay? So you can go ahead and upload it and not put a mobile phone number in, but your layout, where your layout says office phone and address, etc., and then it says mobile phone with a field merge in it, it means for that one particular precious individual who doesn't want their mobile shared publicly, why they're in sales, I've got no idea. But anyway, it'll just be blank, okay? So it's kind of all or nothing if you want it to look as best as it possibly is or can be. All right, so then we need to gather all of that typical data, as I said. So you can send it out to the team and get them to self-populate it, but that will probably take you forever. So try and hit up HR or payroll or someone like that who's going to have all of this information probably sitting in a database somewhere, and you can copy and paste or merge it into the upload template. So once you take that data and then upload it into Eloqua, it's a wizard process. You walk through the wizard process, and the template will have everything you need in it to make sure that when you upload them, they're a non-active user, okay, or a disabled user. So then you need to create your layout, and it may only be one layout. But as I said, if you're a larger organization, potentially with multiple brands, then you might want to create multiple layouts. And then we need to create the rules. So we're going to have a look at both the layout and the rules here in just a moment in a little bit more detail for you. All right, so let's take a look at some layouts, and I'll show you how to navigate to layouts and show you some examples. Okay, so here we are, and remember layouts is in the component library. So to the asset menu and components and signature layout. Now, once you get to the layout area, you'll notice that you can also see rules. So they're actually both here right next to each other. But we're just going to focus on layout for the moment. Now, what we do, we have a couple of layouts which are essentially similar. You'll notice there's no folder structure in here. So you'll notice we have a lot of do not use. So we don't want to delete them. General rule, and we'd never delete anything pretty much. But here you see. So we have multiple different types of layouts, and you can see we've got some where our emails are 16 point or 12 point. They're the two font sizes we predominantly use. Then we have one for our strategic services team. We do joint campaigns, and that's probably worth noting as well. If you are doing joint campaigns, then you want to deliver something that looks like your partner potentially, then you can do that. So we do joint campaigns with Oracle, as you would imagine. And something we can talk about later is the Engage signature. So for Engage and how you want that to look, etc. as well. So we'll have a look at that. But let's jump in and look at the one that we use most of the time here at Marketing Cube, which is this one right here. So what it is, it's actually just a bunch of field merges. And so this icon over here, which is one you may not be overly familiar with, but that icon represents the user area within Eloqua, so user fields. And so these are all the different fields that you can use to build out the signature. Now, our particular signature, you can also include a photo, by the way, which we've done. And the photo, again, is also a field merge, which pulls in. And with a little bit of help from our development team here at Marketing Cube, I was able to get a little bit of HTML magic done, which is all that yucky stuff you can see right there, but it is most brilliant. So yeah, so what that's going to do, and you see this every day. You would have got a, well, actually, did we put it in? No, we don't put in the reminder email. I can't remember actually. I need to have a look. But yeah, that's the signature essentially. So you'll see a photograph of Jason or Adrian or myself or Marika sitting in there, and our individual personal details are listed there. This one's kind of cool as well. So click here to visit our website. So instead of, you can, if you want, just simply drop in a URL, or you can use that particular function, which is a little bit nicer than just having a URL sitting in the email. So that's the layout area of the email. To create a new one, just click on new, and you can see it's a bit of a blank canvas. So we just come in here, type in first name, all the usual suspects. You probably want to have something like, regards, comma, and then first name. Now, keeping in mind, you want to put a space in as well. So last name, like so. If you highlight the whole lot, you can then determine what the font is that you want to use, and also the font size. I'm going to leave it at 16. And so then it's really you're off and running from there. You just really need to find the relevant fields that you want for your signature and drop them in. You're very familiar with field merges and how they work. This is no different. It's just that we're merging from the user fields. We're not merging from a contact. Okay. So that's the layout, and that's just one option in relation to layouts. Okay, let's have a look at the next part. So rules are rules. And so rules really drive everything, and it's rules that enable you to do what you can see on the screen. So that's just a random shot from an email inbox. It's actually our admin email account, I think. And so what we're looking at, what we're trying to control is what appears in that area of a person's inbox within their email. So instead of it being a brand, it can in fact be personalized. So you can see one halfway down there, we've got Jason O'Donnell. And so if that in fact had been a Eloqua email, that's exactly what it would look like. So it'd be Jason O'Donnell. So it becomes far more familiar to me as a person that hopefully I'm communicating with on a regular basis. And so I see Jason's email and I'm interested. And so obviously I want to open that email and have a closer look. The key thing to understand about the rule is we need to identify a key field that you have stored on the contact typically, or maybe a custom object, but typically the contact that determines who gets what. Now, you can see here at Marketing Cube, there's only 3 salespeople, so it's kind of easy to do, right? And so there is a system field. All of you have a system field on the Eloqua contact called salesperson, and that field is designed to have the name, first name and last name of the salesperson contained in it. Now, for us, that works perfectly. However, for some of you larger organizations, there's always that slim chance that you've got 2 John Smiths or 2 Mary Janes. And so using the person's name is really not the best idea. So what we would encourage you to do is to create a custom field on the Eloqua contact called salesperson email address. You could also use a CRM user ID. That's usually just a little bit more cumbersome and harder for people to even verify, because what does an ID mean? It doesn't mean anything unless you know exactly what it's referencing. However, an email address is something that we know is always unique. So even if you do have 2 John Smiths within the organization, likely that the second John will be John.Smith2 or something like that. And so it'll always have a unique value. So that's what we'd encourage you to do. So how does that information get into Eloqua? Well, in an ideal world, this all happens because of CRM integration, because the source of truth as to who within your business actually owns the relationship with the contact or lead typically comes from the CRM. It's not a decision that Eloqua makes. Eloqua simply has access to that information so that it can then drive things like the signature functionality that we're looking at today. So select that key field that defines the email sender, and you'll see there's a drop-down list. And what you'll also notice down the bottom here, and this is what when I said you need to have, or you can have multiple rules. You may want things to display and function slightly differently. And so you don't have to have all of these options ticked. Because remember, there's several constructs. There's a display name. So in the example I showed you earlier, that's where it says Jason O'Donnell. Then you've got the sender display address, the reply to display name, and the reply to address. So let me give you an example. Let's say the CEO says that he or she wants you to send out an email from them to all of the customers. Now, the last thing the poor CEO probably wants is the potentially hundreds or thousands of out-of-office notifications that will come back. And of course, there'll always be those wonderful clients who want to respond and reply, which, I'd argue is a good thing, but sometimes the sheer volume is not appropriate. So even though the email is coming from and shows the email address is coming from the CEO, the reply to email address perhaps could be the executive assistant and not the CEO's inbox. Okay, that would also mean that the executive assistant would receive all of the out of office notifications. We can't control that. Someone has to get the out of office notifications. Personally, I find the out of office notifications that I get every month incredibly valuable. There's a lot of insight contained in those generally, and information which is quite helpful. So don't underestimate the value of those. Okay, so you've got the control, you've got the ability to create rules that in fact behave differently for the same team of people, salespeople, service people, executive team members, whoever, that you maybe create the rule with. In this particular example, you'll notice we've got MC sales team with Marika. Now, why would it be with Marika? She is a member of the sales team and one of our consultants. Yes, so we didn't used to just say MC sales team. But then Marika went on maternity leave, and I thought to myself, we've got all these automated campaigns happening, and they're going to come from Marika, but she's on maternity leave, so that's not going to work. So what I was able to do was go into the existing model that we have and actually remove Marika from the model, so that even if it showed on the contact that Marika was the salesperson, we changed the default. Notice here how it says default sender. So for the period of time that Marika was on maternity leave, any of her contacts that had her as the owner of those contacts, because she wasn't mentioned in the rule, then the default sender was who was applied. In this case, it was Adrian, being the CEO. So you've got quite a bit of flexibility to play around there. And so then when Marika came back from maternity leave, we then restored that back to the model, and everything kept swimming along beautifully, as you would expect it to. So again, just drawing your attention to the options that you've got here. So typically what you would do is not make these changes to the one rule. You would in fact create multiple rules that are just locked in with set variables so that you can use them. Because if people are using these rules, the last thing they need is for you to merrily go ahead and make edits to this one, when in fact that rule is currently being applied to a live campaign. So just be careful on that one. So what I wanted to do here was just take you over now to the contact. So here we are in the Eloqua contact, and this is the key field that we use at Marketing Cube. But you'll notice also a few fields down, there's another one called salesperson email. And so that's the one that I'd encourage you to think about. Now, that is a custom field. That's not a field that everybody has when you buy Eloqua. You need to create that field. We've also got mobile phone number. I find that one is more from a field merge point of view, because typically when you're writing an email and you want to create that personalized experience, it's normal that you might put in the body of your email, hi Jane, thanks so much for catching up. If you wanted to give me a buzz, you can reach me on, and insert the mobile phone number. Yes, it's sitting down in the email signature, but it just seems to flow easier from a written word point of view to actually potentially have the mobile phone number also contained in the body of the email. And so that's why I like to have that there as well. So again, salesperson mobile is also a custom field that we've added to the Eloqua contact. So you'll remember, if I just go back to the home screen to access rules, we go to the component library. Now you'll notice that there doesn't say, you'll look here and you go, well, where there's no signature rules, okay? Just jump to signature layout, and again, you'll see it right here, signature rule. And so let's have a close look, and we'll look at the one that we've created for MC Sales Team with Marika. So first thing is to give it a name, and then identify your default sender. Now the list of people that you see here is your list, of users. So again, if you wanted to have a default sender who is potentially the sales director, then you would create a rule for the sales team. If you wanted to have a rule that was more geared towards service communications, then maybe you would have the service director as the default sender. So remember, the default sender will only be utilized when nobody meets any of the values that you've got listed over here. So that can also be really quite helpful. Another question that sometimes people ask is, certainly in large organizations, it's not unusual to see 25, 35, 45 separate individuals listed here within the rules. And then someone will say to me, well, Derek, what do we do when somebody leaves the organization? Because the sales team or the sales operations team generally don't get the CRM updated. In an ideal world, the CRM team or sales administrators would go into the CRM, find all of the contacts or leads owned by a particular individual who's just left the organization, and then they're able to do a batch change. Like they can take hundreds or thousands of contacts or leads and take them from salesperson A and move them over to salesperson B. But that typically takes some time or doesn't happen fast enough. And of course, the last thing you want to do as a marketing team is send out an email personalized from an individual who's no longer with your organization. That just looks a bit crappy. So how do we fix that? Really simple. We'd simply come in, and this is what I had to do. This is what I had to do for Marika when she went on maternity leave. I came in here and I literally highlighted and pressed delete. So what that meant was that Marika was no longer there. So any of the contacts that had Marika's name on it went to the default sender in this case, which was Adrian Jones. And so then when Marika returned from maternity leave, I simply restored the values here within the rule. So that would make sense. So it's really quite simple. That way, regardless of what the CRM team are doing, because remember, that is your source of truth, regardless of what they're doing, you're in complete control. So you can come in here to the rule, remove the salesperson from the rule, and because they're no longer there, the default will kick in. So you've got the ability here to choose from your contact field or a custom object field. And for some of you who may be using the Eloqua event module, you also have the ability to select from there as well. But the most common I see is certainly contact field. For larger organizations with slightly more complex relationships, sometimes the custom object field is used as well. But that's the field that determines or defines the email sender, as it says there. And then again, you can pick and choose here. You can untick and do whatever works in relation to what you're doing. So when you click on plus over here, what you're doing here essentially is typing in the name of the person that would, well, let's say it's me, for example. So Derek. And then over here, what I'm accessing is a whole list of the users or the email senders. And so that will just populate then with the relevant list, but I don't want to use that. So I'm just going to delete. So that's how we create the rules. So we've created the layout, the look and feel, the cosmetics, I suppose, and then we've also created a rule. Keeping in mind, as I said, you can create multiple rules, so don't feel like you're stuck necessarily just with one particular rule. Okay, we have a silly question. Thank you, Alana. Silly question, is this also a pick list? So the field value, think about this as like any sort of pick list that you might create within Eloqua. You have a value. Was it a value and a, oh, now I've gone blank. Hang on. So this one here, so if I hit plus, this is the value that exists within the actual contact itself. So if we go back to a contact, just randomly, so I looked at the salesperson field here. So the value that sits in the field is this value. So in this case, it's Jason O'Donnell. So that's my value. But the question I think you had related then to this one. So double click to select a user. So this one is yes, there you go, it's loaded for me. And so this becomes the list of users that have been uploaded to Eloqua. So I would put my value in here as Jason O'Donnell. Oh, no, pasted something else. So it'd be Jason O'Donnell. So of course it has to match exactly. So Jason O'Donnell, and then I would come over here and you can search and you'll end up with Jason as an option when that loads. So that's pulling it directly from the user list. There we go. So we have Jason O'Donnell. So that would be a repeat, obviously, of that one. But yes, it is a pick list. And you can click on this menu here. It says add new user, upload, download. Easiest thing to do is if you just look at, where are we? Download users. By downloading the users, you'll then get a bit of a feel for the quality of the data that you've got in there right now and all of the phone numbers and display names, etc. And then you can use that as your template to then re-upload. So if you have new people, what I would do personally is download that, clear out most of the data, but just keep some there as some examples so I know how to replicate it, and then upload the relevant information into Eloqua. So you can see things like personal URLs. So that would be where you would drop in things like a LinkedIn URL for a personal profile, for example. You could also add a personal message. So if you're wanting to have some sort of you could use that for promotional purposes, of course, or it could be a favorite quote by the particular individual in question. So you've got some flexibility to do a range of different things there, so on and so forth. But that's where you go through the process. And so your administrator would then come back and go through the upload process and then file those away for you. Let's now have a look at the sales tools and what these are. So the sales tools are kind of the other part of this whole exercise. So the signature rules and signature layouts, everybody has those. Eloqua, whether you're in basic, standard, or enterprise edition, that's functionality that everybody has. Now, Profiler, most of you would have seen Profiler, but probably because you've accessed it from within Eloqua. And so it's easy enough to see and you can do it from there. However, in order to access how to access Profiler and Engage independent of Eloqua, so let's say you're a salesperson or you're in the service center, then that's a license that's required to do that. And it's fairly economical. I want to say, maybe Jason, you can shoot it through to me on chat, so I'm a little bit smarter, but I'm wanting to say it's around $260 70 US dollars, or is that Aussie dollars? I can't quite remember, but is it reasonable? And that's a per user per year type of exercise. So it's not obscenely expensive, but let me show you the benefit of it, and that might help a little bit as well. So as far as Eloqua is concerned, when we talk sales tools, we're really talking about two particular products, one being Profiler and the other being Engage. So Profiler is the ability for a salesperson or service call center individual to view the digital body language and information about a person. So it's emails they've been sent, that they've opened, clicked on, forms they've submitted with the data submitted in the form. It also shows them website visits, any external activities that you may have created as well. A lead score is also visible there, and also some of the basic contact information, first name, last name, address, contact phone numbers, those things are also displayed within Profiler. Engage is a way for the salesperson, or again, service call center people, to send an on-brand communication to an individual. So whereas when you log into Eloqua, you're creating a segment, and your segment might contain hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of people, what we're doing with Engage is enabling people outside of marketing to send one on-brand email to one person. So it's a one-to-one type of communication. But as far as Eloqua is concerned, that email gets treated as though it's part of a huge campaign. So it's the same tracking and reporting and all that sort of stuff is available to the Engage user through the Engage interface. Now they can send it to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people, etc. And with, I think it's this release, 22B, there were some updates in relation to capping the number of recipients that an individual Engage user can send emails to. So what we're trying to avoid is the Engage user sending one email to 4,500 people. That would be a very onerous exercise for them to do, by the way. But yeah, we can control that and put a cap on it at 10 or 20 or 30, whatever you think is appropriate for Engage users to be doing. So let's have a closer look. So what I want to do is just give you show you some screenshots. Let's pretend I'm a salesperson. They would come to this screen. Now this would be familiar to you, but this actual login screen, the URL is different to the one that you and I use to get into Eloqua, but the login screen looks much the same. So once they get in, they're then presented directly with a search function, basically. So top left-hand corner, you can see I've listed Adrian Jones, and I've got a few Adrians that have popped up there. And so I can then go ahead and click on the first one, Adrian Jones. And so now what I'm seeing is those details. So again, what you're looking at is basically 3 tabs: summary, activities, and details. Most of that information is actually already in front of you on this sort of dashboard view anyway. So we can see Adrian, we can see his title, his job title, his company name, he's an account, or that's the account name. We also have the lead score visible. If there are multiple lead scores, you can change those as well and look at different lead scores. Phone numbers, email address, I can click directly on that and send Adrian an email address and Twitter details. The alert function here enables the Engage or the Profiler user to actually create an email alert that when Adrian hits the website, I'll immediately receive a notification. And that can be really insightful for some salespeople, depending on where they are in that selling experience. Are they negotiating, or is it really early in the funnel process? But they can activate those alerts and have those sent to them immediately. So they can then have a look and see what the person's looking at on the website. Across the top is your dashboard, so the activities, and you'll see they're kind of color-coded across the bottom here. Adrian's reasonably active. I wouldn't say he's hyperactive, but he's reasonably active. And this little threshold here enables you to look at the last 90 days, I think, last month, last 90 days, last 12 months. And so you can get a view, and of course, the most recent activity, and then a summary of the various activities that have taken place. Now, there are other ways to access it, and that could be on a mobile. So same sort of experience. It's not actually an app per se. It's just a mobile responsive application sitting on the web. So I go to the same URL to log in, same login experience. And then again, you can see my view. So again, if I search for Adrian, in this case, I'm seeing recently viewed because I took these screenshots reasonably close together. And Then we come in, and so you can see, again, same information, but we're now just sort of in a mobile view. And what you can also do by toggling on the hamburger menu, I can then access Engage, which is the ability to send the emails. So you can see how nice and tightly the two work together. So when you first arrive at Engage, you're given this sort of a view, which shows you the most recent communications you've sent. And you can see I don't use Engage a great deal. But you hit the compose button. You've also got reports available there as well. You can search for past emails by subject or the email address of the person that they were sent to. And then you can arrange a template library for your sales team so they can choose from on-brand communications that have been prepared by the marketing team. And so that's looking at a recent view. You'll notice there's my and all as well. So if there are any unique to that individual, they're captured there as well. So that's the mobile view exercise, or specifically mobile. This is now looking at it from a tablet point of view, specifically from an iPad. In this example, again, you'll see same login screen. Always remember to use the Remember Me, makes life a little bit easier. So now, of course, we have a bit more screen real estate on an iPad. So we see a little bit more information, looking a little bit more like the desktop view that we looked at a moment ago. But again, I can still see different views, etc. I can still do a preview on the communication that was sent, and I see that email with all of the personalization. So it'll say, Dear Derek or Dear Adrian or whatever the case may be. And then if we jump across into Engage, this is just giving you an example. I showed you before the recent view. This is now looking at all templates. So this enables the salesperson to scroll through and find the relevant communications. And as a marketing team, you control what's visible to the team within that template library. And then this is the actual editor itself. So here it is. This is one of the user has actually clicked on one of those template emails. And so you can see everything is templated. So this particular email template has been geared to follow an in-person or face-to-face meeting. So it enables the Engage user to type in the email address. And when they start typing, that's accessing the Eloqua database that you and I are familiar with, the contact database. So if you have hundreds of thousands of contacts in there, that's fine. They'll pull those through. If it's a brand new contact, you can still go and put that in and go through the process, and it'll prompt you just to probably add a couple of more pieces of information, and then you're good to go. And then you're done. So that's basically looking at Profiler and Engage. And as you can see, you can access it from the desktop, you can access it from a mobile or from a tablet device as well. So if you need a hand with any of those things, or you've got more questions and you'd like to understand those in a bit more detail, go ahead and send an email through to support. You can use that QR code there if you like to use your phone to scan that. And we'd be more than happy to answer those for you. Now, let me just jump in here. It looks like there's some chat here. Okay, there. Thanks, Jason. So Jason's just confirmed it's 260 Australian per user per year. So profile, so that would be 260 for Engage, 260 for Profiler. And if you're any good marketer, you would be insisting that the sales team pay for this, right? That comes out of their budget, not out of the marketing budget. So yeah, 260 per user Australian per user per year for both of those. Thanks, Jason. So I suggested I wanted to give to you some tips around the implementation of these sales tools. And we use that term fairly liberally, both email signature rules and layouts, as well as, well, I do at least, Profiler and Engage, and how they can all kind of work together. So really just these are just some thoughts. If this is an avenue you want to go down, then let's have a think about it and work out the best way to implement it. If you have a small team, as in 2 or 3, 4 salespeople, then it probably doesn't need to be too heavily engineered. If you have a much larger team and potentially a geographically dispersed team, then yes, there's some thinking that needs to go into that process. But Engage and Profiler really work hand in hand. You can probably get some, or you would definitely get some insight with simply having access to Profiler, but Engage then enables you to act on that, because essentially Profiler is a read-only tool. So we look at it and it will give us a bunch of information, but we can't do anything specifically. We can't feed information back into Profiler. It's really a read-only type of tool. So then Engage gives you the chance to do something with that information. So I see things in Profiler. I see people are looking at certain things. I see that they've registered for an event. I see that they've looked at certain pages on the website. Engage is a way for me to reach out to them with on-brand specific communications that might help them understand things a little bit further. So think about it, not just from a B2B point of view, think about it from a university point of view. So if you've got service people in a call center talking to prospective students, and that conversation narrows down now to a particular area, maybe it's engineering or maybe it's science or economics, whatever it might be, that would enable the call center person to then potentially access a template that is specific to those various disciplines, personalizing it with that little bit of information and even being able to add their own comments into that email, which is, thank you, Jason, for your time on the phone today. I hope what we discussed was helpful. As promised, there's some information contained below. And that could just be their little blurb. And then the rest is all heavily templated. And you can, as a marketing team, you can then lock that content as well. So you do have some flexibility there. Okay, so let's think about it, expanding it out a little bit. Two things that we won't dive into too much today, but I really just want to make you aware. If your business is using Chrome as your sort of certified internal browser, these Eloqua sales tools are available as an extension to Chrome. So once you purchase the licenses, how you access it, there are a range of ways. You can access it, as I showed you, directly in your browser on your desktop. You can do it on your mobile phone. You can do it on your iPad, but you can then also do it directly from within Chrome. So that can be quite helpful, giving sales team, usually that's where they're playing. They might have their Gmail there. That's where they're going. They don't want to have to go out and do other things. They can keep everything concentrated within that same experience. Now, if your organization is using Outlook, then there's also an add-in for Outlook where you can have access to Profiler and Engage as a part of that email composer option as well. So the sales tools, these are not extra fees, by the way. So that Microsoft and Chrome, that's not extra from a cost point of view. That's included in your license. It's really just how you access it. Do you access the sales tools through Microsoft? Do you access it through Google? Or do you just access it through a browser, period? It doesn't really matter. So you've got some options there to play with. So this is an approach that we've used that we've found to be quite successful when it comes to this process of implementing the sales tools, specifically looking at Engage and Profiler. The key thing is to get the audience right from the beginning. So if you can make sure that you've got the right people within the sales team who will actually appreciate and understand the value of what Profiler and Engage is offering you. I wish I had $1 for every time I heard Jason, our account director, say, I just wish more salespeople would see the value of this data. And that's just what he's able to see through Profiler. There's all sorts of other tools. There's LinkedIn and a whole range of other tools. But the information that you're able to get and look and understand what a person's interests are based on their behavior, that's what Profiler does better than anything else. So the other key thing is don't sit in our little marketing ivory tower thinking we know what the salespeople need. The best thing is go to the sales team and say, hey, guys, when you have a meeting and you finish a prospect call, is there a standard type of email that you write? Do you go back to one and just do a save as of a past one and then hope that you don't put old company names in or old details in, etc.? Are there standard brochures you like to send, like a PDF? Are there certain links on the website that you kind of always want to send to people, etc.? Help them by developing then an Engage template that factors in those various pieces, which is going to then save them time. But then also by using Engage, they get all of the tracking that comes with it. They use Outlook or Gmail and the email just gets sent and that's it, right? But by using Engage, they can now have that email treated by Eloqua as if it was a part of any big campaign. They'll get to see who opened it. They'll get to see what was clicked on and how often the person potentially went back and clicked on various things within that particular email. So they get a lot more insight around the behavior of the recipient of that particular email. So then to the way you get your emails, because as you would imagine, you've probably got hundreds or thousands of emails today sitting in Eloqua. How do I get just a portion of those to appear in Engage? That's a really good question. I'll show you how to do that here in a minute. And then just to go back to that previous point earlier, make sure we get all of those typical business card details that the person would want in their signatures uploaded to Eloqua, because we need to build out those user profiles. So we may as well do that at the same time, because we can use that for email signatures as well. Okay, so for those of you who might be Eloqua administrators, you might be familiar with this part of Eloqua, which is the email group area, which is under email setup in the asset menu of Eloqua. So this is Marketing Cube's instance that you can see in front of you. There's a whole bunch of email groups that we have, but I just want to draw your attention specifically to the Engage email group. Now you can call this whatever you want. You can call it Mickey Mouse if you like, it doesn't really matter. We just thought it made sense to call it Engage. Then you'll notice there's an option down here which says make this email group available in Eloqua for Sales. So Eloqua for Sales is Engage, okay? And so by ticking that box, it then means that any emails that you create, and you would just simply store in a folder called maybe Engage, that then means that those emails are then visible to the sales team from within their Engage template library. So they can pick and choose and do what they need to do. So that's how you do it. That's how you create your emails and make sure they're visible within the Engage application. I wanted to show you a quick hack this month, and maybe something you are or are not aware of. But we had a discussion a few weeks ago with a client, and they just have a problem where they've got a team who are providing briefs for certain events and different things, but they never seem to be able to provide all of the information needed to build everything out at the same time. So what ends up happening is the poor team who are building things are creating a segment to send out invites, and that's on one canvas. Then they're creating another canvas, and then they're having to play around with the segment to work out who's registered, who hasn't, yada, yada, yada. And it just became really onerous for them to do. Of course, in an ideal world, you'd have everything ready and to go at the same time, but we all know that's just not the reality of it. So what I want to do is show you how to move somebody from one campaign to another. So if we come into the campaign canvas, and a typical example would be something like an audience like this, and you might then have a wait step in place. Let me just move my Zoom controls out of the way. So then you might have a wait step in place, and maybe that's it, right? You've got enough information from whomever's providing it to you. You've got the audience configured, you've got your invitation email done, but they don't have any of the second invitation or third invitation or reminder emails done, which gets really cumbersome, okay? So what you can do is use the move to campaign function. So the move to campaign function means that everybody that's sitting in this segment will work their way through here, and all of those people collectively will in fact be moved to another campaign. So I'm just going to randomly choose one here. Let's run with the June user group. So what you do is you locate your second campaign canvas. So in this scenario, it's going to be canvas number 2 for the second invitation potentially, or the reminder campaign. And then you nominate where on the campaign canvas you want to drop that person or that group of people. And so you might choose something like that, for example. And so when you do that, you say choose, and then it'll show you the icon here, and it'll actually give you the information here as well when you hover over it. And so that campaign that you're moving them to, that campaign doesn't actually have to be active. It can just simply be a wait step. As a bare minimum, it may just simply be a wait step because you don't have the email ready, etc. at this point. So that's just something for you to be aware of. That way you're not having to manually play around with the segment, work out who's registered, who hasn't, and so on and so forth. You can just simply move people from one canvas to the next automatically, essentially meaning that it's one large canvas kind of stuck together, if that makes sense, if that's a good analogy. All right, we're on the home run, and what's new and what's coming. with release 22B due in this month. So just a quick high-level view on some of the things that stood out to us that would be of interest. So with 22A, which came out in February, you might remember there was the auto open function that had been added to Insight. Now we have the auto click. And if you're a little bit like me, you might have been thinking, hang on a minute, auto clicking, who's auto clicking? So the auto clicking can sometimes be generated, as you see here in the second bullet point, by scanning or privacy tools. So some larger organizations will have some fairly sophisticated software that sits on their email server before the email even gets into your inbox. So, and in the process of doing those scanning or the scanning of those emails, it actually goes through and clicks on things. And so what we don't want is those clicks to be reported back to Eloqua as if the person had clicked. So now what we'll be able to do is see very separately these auto clicks. Now, just like opens, when you go into Eloqua and you look at segments and you look at the campaign canvas, you've got questions there pre-built that say, has the person opened the email? Have they clicked on the email, etc.? That will only be, how do I describe it? I suppose a manual click or a manual open versus an auto click or an auto open. So auto clicks and auto opens are not included. And that's that third bullet point there. They're not included in the total click-throughs metric that you see or any associated click-through rates. And the same applies with the auto opens as well. Now, they will only be captured after release 22B. So if you're on pod 7, that process has already begun, but just something for you to be aware of. Now, if you have a number of apps added to Eloqua, just some updates in relation to the scheduling of those. Those used to happen out of sync, but I think once a quarter, not with the release, but at a different time frame. They're now moving that to a monthly maintenance schedule, which is good news. More frequent updates is a good thing from a security point of view and also function release point of view, which is great. So just for you to be aware of that. But the key thing is no platform downtime, which is a nice thing. Oh, here's the one about sales tools, Engage, that I mentioned earlier. So you can limit the number of sales emails that a rep can send to the same contact over a period of time. So what I spoke about earlier was slightly different. You do have the existing functionality to, as a whole, say to the sales team, okay, sales team, you can only send 30 emails at any one point, and it may go to 30 individuals. Okay, what this is enabling you to do, though, is to limit the number of sales emails that a rep can send to one person. So if you don't want the sales team doing daily communications to a prospective customer, then you've got the ability to provide some control over that. So that's good news. The other one, this one's probably a little bit of a yawn for some of you, but if you're an Eloqua administrator, this one's quite exciting. This relates to the management of SSL certificates. And we're moving to a new process in pod 6 and 7. So pod 7 is based here in Sydney, Australia. It's a service physically here in the country. And many of our Australian, New Zealand, and some Asia clients are on pod 7. And so as of 22B, which has happened for you, this process is happening. So it's probably something that your Eloqua administrator might want to talk to Marketing Cube about just to get a little bit more information and to understand it. But what it means is that the automatic renewal of certificates prior to the expiration will be the future, which is wonderful. The worst case scenario is when those SSL certificates expire, all of a sudden pages aren't visible, images don't show in emails. It's a world of pain. So this is a great step in the right direction. Alrighty, and that brings us to a close, people, but obviously here for Q&A. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop those into the Q&A or the chat, and I will hang around here for a few minutes and would love to hear from you. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. We will have information to you very shortly for the June user group, and that will cover trigger-based campaigns and also looking at anniversary type of emails. How do I trigger an anniversary, whether it's in fact an annual anniversary or other types of anniversaries or recurring types of reminders that you want to send that are triggered based on a whole range of things, whether it's CRM data, behavior, a whole range of different things. We can look at those. So look forward to seeing you next month. Here we go. We do have one chat. And that's a thank you for joining us. And I agree. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. And we'll see you next month.